New Year's Eve. China alerts the World Health Organization to a flu-like outbreak in Wuhan. On the 13th of January 2020, authorities reveal the first case outside China after a woman is quarantined in Thailand. China confirms human-to-human transmission on the same month of January 2020. On the 23rd of January, Wuhan goes into lockdown and residents try to flee the virus-hit province. On the 30th of January, WHO declares the virus a global health emergency.
The decision about whether or not to declare a public health emergency of international concern is one I take extremely seriously.
On the 31st of January, Russia and the UK confirmed their first coronavirus cases. February 5th, the Diamond Princess cruise ship docked in Japan's Yokohama is quarantined with 3,700 people on board. On Valentine's Day, Egypt becomes the first country in Africa to report a case. February 26th, Italy, the location of Europe's worst outbreak, reports upwards of 400 cases and at least 12 deaths. On the same day, the US warns of a possible community spread after a case in California with no traceable exposure. Still on the same day, Brazil confirms it has the first case of the virus in Latin America. On the 27th of February, Iran says its death toll has risen to at least 26, marking the highest number outside of China. February 27th, a China Southern Airlines flight with 239 people lands at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, triggering anger across the country.
I don't know why we can allow a whole flight with 239 passengers to land from Guangdong, if I'm not wrong, which is the second highest after Wuhan, to land and we say self-quarantine. How do you monitor self-quarantine?
The decision that was made with the best interests of the country at heart. I don't know whether these people are unwell or not, whether these are allegations, whether they're from China or from India or from Marakwet or from Kisumu. It's hard for me.
If we can refuse our students to come here and we allow Chinese to come to our country, are we really doing what is right for Kenyans?
And you have admitted that even some countries who have got superior health institutions have had people infected in their countries. How about ours?
I can't go into the intricacies of the disease. I don't have the capacity, the knowledge, or the understanding.
This country is a joke. Your answers are underwhelming and sickening, to say the least.
Kenya Airways bows to pressure and suspends flights to China.
There are things that we did wrong. The first thing is fully aware that there are already areas in the world that had reported their cases. China, for example. But we still allowed flights to come into the country from those places without restricting the movement of those people from those particular areas, without any form of quarantine. These people literally went freely to interact with the rest of Kenyans. That's the first mistake that we did.
It is my personal view that actually I think COVID has been here much longer than our first patient was announced.
The night before the first case of COVID-19 was reported in the country, 2 vans with communication jamming equipment made their way to the parking lot of the oldest hospital in the country. A clandestine operation began a few minutes before midnight. The official codename for the operation was restricted to a few officials who are privy to the test results of a patient, codenamed Patient Number 1. The unit handling COVID-19 testing was out of bounds and limited to duty personnel. The computer networks were disabled and there was no phone network. This ensured no leakage of the test results until the president was notified of the virus presence in the country. Hours later, the unseen enemy brought out top government officials on the stairs of Harambee House. The hypothetical was now a reality.
I want to inform you that the Ministry of Health has confirmed the first coronavirus case in Kenya. The case was confirmed on the 12th, which was last night, as the first one to be reported in Kenya since the beginning of the outbreak in China.
The case of a female Kenyan citizen who traveled back to Nairobi from the US via London on March 5, 2020, forced the government to invoke the Public Health Act. Still, there were concerns over open borders and flights jetting into the country from regions that had seen an upsurge of the virus.
There's a lot of laxity and Kenyans are particularly very, very worried.
Can you declare an emergency, quarantine the airport and other places where these people are coming in?
The other day, Chinese who are working in Kenya, in Makueni County, walked into a hospital in Makindu. Everybody, even the medics, took off.
When we started now interacting with government, it seemed like they had just quickly come together to start figuring out what to do. I actually raised a statement in the floor of the House after a Chinese flight had arrived here, and we were in uproar in Senate. That statement, I think, was discussed for a better part of that afternoon because we couldn't believe that we could have a flight coming in directly from China at a time like that. And that was before our first, zero patient was announced. I raised the statement, it is here, and we never got a response from the ministry.
In your statement, what are the issues that you were raising?
In fact, I have it here. Okay. If I could just highlight it for you. Yeah. We asked the ministry to state the measures they had put in place to improve surveillance services at the points of entry in the country, particularly due to the fact that the virus was airborne and could be transmitted from one person to another. That was the first question. The second is to outline the plans, if any, that the national government had put into place to train medical personnel on identification, education, treatment in health facilities of the virus in accordance with WHO guidelines. And then third, to state the measures being put in place to ensure Kenyans, as well as our medical personnel, were insulated from the possibility of the virus spreading to the counties. And fourth, to explain how the many small-scale traders would acquire their goods and businesses from China, because we were also demanding that the borders be closed down. Those are some of the issues we raised.
Did you
the 19th of February. No.
19th of February?
Yes, we didn't get a response.
Why do you think there was no response?
I want to think that there was no strategy. That's why. Yeah. Otherwise, there would have been a response. It would have come in very quickly. So my view is that there was no answer at that time for these questions.
There were fears the virus was already in the country before the announcement of the first case was made, and what if became now what? As COVID-19 was sweeping across the globe, it was about to expose the deepened vulnerabilities that have existed in Kenya. 2 diseases were going to coexist together: corruption and COVID-19. Has this pandemic produced COVID-19 millionaires?
Absolutely, absolutely. There are numerous millionaires because of the COVID-19. This is not a laughing matter. Let me tell you, if a country like Kenya would get serious to business and crack the whip, then I believe their senators who should not be sitting in that house. Because they are committee members. They form the committee members at Parliament, at the Senate level. They form the committee members at the national level. They are the particular members who are actually trading with the government medical supply agency that was meant to equip the country, that was meant to advise the president, that was meant to, on behalf of the county government and the national government, outsource for what was needed in order to fight COVID-19.
There are reports from investigators that some of the Senate members in your committee are trading with KEMSA. Are you one of them? Thousands of miles away, Jack Ma, the founder of China's e-commerce giant Alibaba and the Alibaba Foundation, teamed up to send donations of medical equipment to over 100 countries in the world to fight the pandemic. Donations to Africa to boost the continent's efforts to fight the virus were shipped to Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, which houses the African Union headquarters. Ethiopia had partnered with Jack Ma to distribute the donations to the rest of Africa, and the billionaire posted on his official Twitter handle that the donations were on their way. Kenya was waiting. The first portion of the promised assistance included more than 6 million face masks, 1.1 million test kits, and 60,000 protective suits. The consignment landed at Bole International Airport on the morning of the 22nd of March. The packages were labeled with a quote from Nelson Mandela: "When people are determined, they can overcome anything." Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed Ali tweeted the distribution to the other countries would begin on March 23rd. "12 days after the first positive case was reported in the country, the first batch of equipment from the Chinese billionaire arrived at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport through an Ethiopian Airlines Boeing 787 cargo flight.
I want to assure you again that we'll deploy this resource into immediate use to be able to help Kenyan people tackle the scourge of coronavirus disease.
As other African countries were receiving their donations and thanking the Chinese billionaire, Kenya too expressed her gratitude.
We are grateful to the many friends of Kenya across the globe like Jack Ma, who yesterday donated testing kits and other equipment to support us.
As the consignment of test kits and protective gear was being offloaded, two companies were involved in the clearing of the medical supplies. Strangely, the shipment disappeared to a private warehouse, and no one wanted to talk about it.
On the issue of the incidents at the airport, yes, indeed, we are aware that there was something like that there was the Jack Ma donations and other donations that have come. But it's an incident. We know that there was something like that. There is an ongoing investigation, and therefore I can't talk about it any more than that. Let the enforcement agencies and the detectives determine who was trying to do that.
When Jack Ma donated masks, literally to help Kenya, where did the mask go?
Well, the consignment disappeared from the airport.
Where were the records? Are they there at KEMSA? To show that this is exactly what we received from Jack Ma, this is what came in, we cleared the goods.
Do you know what happened to the Jack Ma donation to Kenya?
We are aware because we have interacted with KEMSA. As you know, KEMSA is the body that takes care of medical supplies as well as medicines and all that. So they were the ones who received the Jack Ma kits. They confirmed to us they had received them. They even showed us their logs. So we have them in the report that we tabled in Parliament, that these kits were indeed received. And how they were to be distributed, they even showed us, they had tables and templates which they showed us how the kits were going to be distributed.
This is what KEMSA presented to the Senate. In a summary dated May 5th, 2020, of the Jack Ma donations to the counties. Do you know what happened to part of the donation? Because reports indicate that part of the consignment was actually stolen.
The part when the stealing came out, I think we had interacted with KEMSA the first round, and we were about to do our second round of engagement with KEMSA at the time when our committee, of course, when we lost our chair at that time. So we lost about 2 weeks of engagement, which we want to restart now, our engagements again, so that we can find out what is happening.
Megascope Healthcare and Crown Healthcare Limited are the two companies that were appointed by KEMSA and authorized to clear the consignment from JKIA. There are records to show they received the kits, but there is no public record of what happened.
The reason why the records are not there is because the whole system was manipulated. The consignment came, it was cleared and sold out. Some went to Tanzania, we know.
So do you know how much was taken to Tanzania, or sold rather to Tanzania?
Yes.
And what Kenyans received from the Jack Ma donation?
Yes, I would approximate and tell you that over 3/4 were taken to Tanzania. The quarter that was left to circulate in the market were sold out to other companies who are suppliers, and they are existing suppliers of KEMSA. Thereafter, they inflated the price and sold the goods back to KEMSA.
What is so bad about it is that we don't even know when to do corruption or when not to do corruption. You'd think that this is a time not to do corruption, and on donated funds. I mean, come on.
NTV Investigates has established through the Network Action Against Corruption, an agency that has been probing the matter, that nearly a dozen unscrupulous companies in Tanzania benefited from the Jack Ma donation meant for Kenyans. The fraudsters, with the backing of high-ranking government officials and their sponsors, including top-level managers at KEMSA, conspired to move the consignment by road to Tanzania. Police officers, following instructions from their seniors, escorted the shipment.
These were all fraudsters, fleecing and looting public money, donors, both donors and government money. Some of these people are in government serving, some of them are not government, but they jointly agreed to take advantage of the COVID-19 to loot massively from the government.
Meetings regarding the meticulous plan as the curfew and other restrictions were being enforced were held in a private office block along Chalby Drive in Lavington, Nairobi. The office block, which we can't reveal because of ongoing investigations, is where the planning and coordination of the looting of the COVID-19 funds and supplies were done, according to an insider. One of the Tanzanian companies, known as Pivotech Company Limited, registered in 2007, received part of the diverted consignment. The company, based in Dar es Salaam, has no record of dealing in medical supplies. According to their website, the company offers generator maintenance, telecoms tower commissioning, civil works, network installation, and aircon maintenance.
There's too much power play, there's too much power trade, there's too much influence, there's too much, because if you look at the people associated with the Megascope company, the Health Crown company, these are people who really sit with who is who in this country. So who would even imagine they would want to investigate these people?
Are you then saying that they're enjoying state protection?
I don't want to call that state protection, but I know they're enjoying some protection somewhere.
We just think about our bellies. It is heartbreaking. Dennis, let me tell you, it is heartbreaking. It pains me. Sometimes you feel the wheels of justice turn a little too slowly. At Parliament, we have all these processes. We can't even move as fast as probably we would want to because there are processes and procedures to everything we do at committee. But it is sad. And you know what? Kenyans need to wake up one day and decide, enough is enough.
As COVID-19 altered and disrupted the way of life for many Kenyans, with the fear of the virus crushing the economy on a scale never witnessed before, it became apparent financial muscle was going to be flexed. An emergency fund was set up and a colossal amount of money started flowing. In several government institutions, circulars went round offices requesting but quietly making it compulsory for civil servants to donate part of their salaries to the COVID-19 emergency fund. On May 6, 2020, the International Monetary Fund Executive Board in Washington, D.C. approved and wired $739 million to Kenya, that is 78.3 billion shillings, from its rapid credit facility to support Kenya's response to COVID-19. In the same month of May, on the 20th, the World Bank approved and wired $1 billion, which is 108 billion shillings, to Central Bank of Kenya. On April 2nd, the Ministry of Health had received an additional $50 million, equivalent to 5.2 billion shillings credit from the World Bank to increase the pool of funds to finance the production of hand sanitizers, protective gear for medical personnel, and to scale up the bed capacity for COVID-19 patients. By this time, the confirmed positive cases in the country had risen to 81. On the 22nd of May, the African Development Bank loaned Kenya 188 million euros, which was 22.5 billion shillings, to support Kenya's efforts to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic and mitigate the related economic, health, and social impacts. On the 9th of June, the European Union gave a grant of $78 million, which was 7.8 billion shillings, towards addressing the social economic impact of COVID-19 in the country. The EU has contributed more than 35 billion shillings to the country's COVID-19 response kitty, with other EU member states having contributed a further 3.3 billion shillings for the same. As more money to acquire medical supplies including PPEs and kits for mass testing was now available, it opened a floodgate and a looting spree began. Do we know so far how much money has been looted?
Yes, the current figures we have at KEMSA for money that cannot be accounted for is actually at 43 billion.
And is this money from the donors, including money from Treasury?
It's all inclusive.
It's all inclusive.
It's all inclusive. And you see, even the figures that probably are in the public is far much below that.
The feeding frenzy by the symbiotic network was only getting started. Was this looting premeditated, or an opportunity presented itself?
I thank you. This was an opportunity that came, and it only came to the rich so that they could actually enrich themselves better.
At the expense of Kenyans?
Why are normal suppliers on the streets were not given a chance to loot? Yet I believe they presented themselves. They wanted to be part and parcel of the system. But look at the companies involved. Who are they? Who are they? They are big political financiers.
But what is shocking is that you would think that because of COVID, we would have a bit of humaneness, utu. You'd think that these cartels would say, for once, let's not bring our shenanigans here. But the issue is so frustrating. You've even had the CS himself be so frustrated with his own officials in the ministry. And KEMSA, we know those problems that KEMSA is having that I'm talking about.
KEMSA needed the medical supplies, but through a tendering process that was so twisted, the cabal had its eye on the money, and KEMSA was the means to the bank vault. Several genuine companies that traditionally were supplying to KEMSA found themselves on the outside, as new companies from well-connected individuals got the tenders. Due to ongoing investigations, we shall hide their identities. What was your relationship like with KEMSA?
Well, I think it was after a few inquiries here and there, somebody's asking who has what in the country, then we happen to have a few items.
And when we say items, what exactly do you mean?
Items that could be used, for example, the coveralls and masks. We had a few of those items that the country needed at that particular time, and there was none in the country. So we were called, do you have this? Yes, we had a few. Could you provide more? Yes, we could.
In April, KEMSA wrote to several companies with reference to tender medical supplies. It says in part, and I quote, "The government of Kenya has set aside funds to undertake emergency procurement of medical commodities in the preparedness of COVID-19. It is intended that part of the proceeds of the funds will be used to cover eligible payments under the contract." It continued, "You are hereby invited to submit a bid as per attached document." Charles Juma signed the letter for the Chief Executive Officer, Jonah Manjari. One company received a letter in April stating, and I quote, "The government of Kenya has identified your organization on a strategic partnership to supply KEMSA with the following items." We have edited out the list, but it continues, quote, "You are therefore requested to supply the available quantities for the mentioned commodities to KEMSA Embakasi warehouse immediately in response to the emergency." KEMSA CEO Jonah Manjari signed the letter. The company won the tender for delivery of the medical supplies with agreed timelines. But 1 week later, the same company received a letter terminating the tender. Knowing there was a global demand and pressure on importing the crucial medical supplies, some KEMSA officials took advantage of the situation to cancel and award other preferred companies.
There was an issue. There was even an issue with some of the companies that had been given the leeway to procure on behalf of. There was 1 or 2 companies that were mentioned that we picked out during our committee at that time. We did flag a couple of things and we put our recommendations in the report at that time.
Were they trading on behalf of some powerful individuals, perhaps?
We never got to see who the owners of some of those companies were, but it was clear that how they even got to, to win the tenders, there were question marks. That one we could see. Yeah, and we put them to task at that particular committee sitting. In fact, I don't know why we didn't have media in that particular sitting. It was a heated sitting. And I remember we sat for very many hours because we were hearing from some stakeholders. We had some doctors. And I think we had the pharmacy board as well was represented. We had quite a number of stakeholders on one side who were saying one thing, and KEMSA was saying another thing, and we were able to really dig into that.
In protest, the aggrieved companies wrote to KEMSA regarding the breach of the contractual agreement and sought clarity on the matter. But KEMSA had moved on.
We were given an order, but I think sad part is that after you get the order, it gets cancelled. We know once you cancel an order, it means you're not interested. Yeah, but you can see the need is there. But maybe they're getting elsewhere.
through the investigations, we were able to establish that the management, working hand in hand with the cartels, I don't want to call them cartels anymore, I want to call them criminals, working hand in hand with criminals to obtain information from the system belonging to other companies, other entities, other suppliers. What they do, the procurement committee would then influence the decision of the evaluation committee and agree to award a tender or a contract to a particular firm. Once the letter of award is drawn, immediately it's cancelled. Then in the system, the same information is not deleted. The information is supplied to the criminals. What criminals do, they would obtain documents of CR12. They would obtain the information on tax. They would obtain other, statutory documents belonging to those other suppliers. Then they would manipulate the system, move to the banks, open similar accounts, purporting they are the shadow directors. So from KEMSA, funds would flow.
According to KEMSA records, your company is one of those that received payment after supplying to KEMSA. And you're saying that you never received a single coin.
Yeah, we've not received any shilling from KEMSA regards to COVID supplies that we've done. Yeah, so I do not know where that information came from, because at least somebody should have verified with us or with our bank.
Do you believe that a company, a shadow company, used your name and your bank account details to get the money instead of you?
Well,
is that possible?
This is Kenya, it is possible, it has happened once, or I think once or twice.
Oh, it has happened?
Yes, there's been an attempt to use our name. Actually, even some put in a document and took to KEMSA and said, you need to pay this new account instead of this other one. So somebody's changing account details.
The awarding and subsequent cancellation of tenders within a short period because of failure to deliver on time, despite contravening the delivery timelines, was only meant to frustrate and make it impossible for genuine companies to do business with KEMSA. Those behind the fraud then took advantage of the cancellations to use the same information in the system and give to well-connected companies.
Say, for example, NTV was given a letter to supply 217 million worth of goods. The same NTV got a cancellation letter that now you cannot supply because of A, B, C, D. Basically, you'll pick your letter and move out as a company. But how else would the system show that that NTV again was paid 217 million? So where investigation should start is actually the procurement and the finance division at KEMSA.
The KEMSA Direct Procurement Framework Contracting Section 3 under the Award of Contracts Clause 34.2 states that, and I quote, the determination will evaluate the tenderer's financial, technical, production capabilities and tenderer's past performance. This is based on an examination of documentary evidence.
That's the only thing that can explain all these things we're hearing of small new companies coming in and being given big orders. Because if you look at procurement, a company that is probably registered in February, you cannot have enough financial muscle, or you cannot show 3-year statement, which is required in KEMSA. So when they're giving these ones, who they are.
In this confidential letter seen by NTV, where the Parliamentary Health Committee was supposed to investigate misuse of the 500 million shillings on COVID-19 emergency response and 1.1 billion shillings on the supply and installation of the racking system. Names of 12 companies associated with the contracts and supplies were to be investigated. But 7 of the companies listed here had their tenders cancelled according to investigations. However, their names still appear in the KEMSA public procurement system as the multi-million bids went to shadow companies of well-connected individuals and friends.
We did establish at committee that there's a very big variance between the KEMSA pricing and what the local and other suppliers have. They've been saying they are the cheapest, but our stakeholders have brought us price lists of other suppliers who are much cheaper and who KEMSA will not do business with.
Did KEMSA lie to your committee?
On the issue of the pricing, yes. This they did because they told us they were the cheapest and they assured us they were the cheapest. It is on record. But we found that they were not the cheapest. So yes, they lied.
In this document sent to the Clerk of the Senate by the Kenya Healthcare Federation, KEMSA prices for PPEs was compared to what other sellers were giving. Under the item description, a pack of 50 3-ply face masks, KEMSA was selling at 5,000 shillings, while others were selling them at 1,881 and 2,325. KEMSA was selling a KN95 particular respirator mask for 735 shillings, while others were quoting 400 shillings and 350. A complete PPE kit was sold at 9,975 shillings by KEMSA, while 2 others had a price list of 4,124 and 5,240. Other items revealed clear discrepancies. There was another lie. In a statement by KEMSA dated 7th May 2020, KEMSA wrote to the Senate saying the agency had an adequate stock of COVID-19 related products and can mobilize any additional requirements within short lead time.
If you walk to KEMSA's store, the store is literally empty.
What do you mean when you say empty?
There is nothing. Where are the beds coming from?
We are looking into issues of PPEs because when we started dealing with KEMSA, we had quite a bit of PPEs. That and plus what is undergoing local production. And now the question is, why do we have a gap in the PPEs? Why do we have hospitals and frontline workers without PPEs? That is a very big question which we want to ask. It has now reached a point where the government has asked governors to procure their own PPEs because KEMSA can't seem to meet the demand, which we are curious why. Because when we started, they should have been able to meet that demand.
As KEMSA was dealing with a myriad of other issues, there were other players interested in the COVID-19 money.
What happens here is very interesting. You would get members of the Senate also supplying KEMSA, apparently, what is not there.
Can this be proved?
Yes, it can be proved. Some of the members go through, of course, they would go through, the extensive proxies to ensure that they win the tenders, they get the money, they supply nothing.
Take the example of Killig Limited. According to records at the Department of the Registrar General, Killig Company was registered on January 22, 2020, with the apparent anticipation of the global pandemic coming through our borders. It was not a question of if, but when. The company, whose directors are Xi Jinping and Wilbrod Gatei Gashoka, received a direct tender a month later to deliver PPEs at the cost of 4 billion shillings with no documented evidence of financial, technical or production capabilities at an inflated cost of 9,000 shillings as opposed to the market price of 5,600. The actual beneficiaries of the contract are not the persons listed on the company as shareholders. They are just proxies. A Nairobi lawyer registered the company on behalf of a vocal Jubilee Party power broker and the personal assistant of a top official in the opposition.
Since this opportunity came, and it came to the people who understand themselves, there was no procedure, there was no process. It is take and go.
Ziwala Limited, whose directors and shareholders are Samantha Ngina Mudhama and June Duta Kenywa, got an 84 million shillings contract to supply 120,000 pieces of KN95 face masks, where a piece was priced at 700 shillings. Other firms that benefited from the COVID-19 billions include Shop and Buy Limited, registered on February 14, 2020, just under a month before the country recorded its first positive case. The company, owned by James Kipketer Chululei, received a 970 million shillings deal to supply 100,000 PPE kits at the cost of 9,000 shillings each and 100,000 pieces of KN95 face masks at the price of 700 apiece. Accenture Kenya Limited was given a tender of 108 million shillings to supply 12,000 PPEs. Abyssinia Group of Industries received a 20 million shillings contract to supply 30,000 pieces of N95 face masks. Bell Industries, owned by Titus Kirea Ibui and Masi Karambu Ngera, was contracted to supply 15,000 PPE kits and 5,000 thermometers at the cost of 10,000 shillings apiece. The payout was 185 million shillings. Medlife Biologicals Limited got 2 tenders worth 230 million shillings to supply 200,000 KN95 face masks and 20,000 disposable masks. Nanopay Limited, owned by Ahmed Rahim Mahmoud Mohammed, got a tender of 35 million shillings to supply 50,000 pieces of KN95 face masks. Light Up Africa Limited, owned by Miss Emma Wanjiko Maina and Martha Wanjiro Thuku, got a bid of 25 million shillings to provide 50,000 pieces of 500 milliliters hand sanitizers. Walabis Ventures Limited, owned by Wanjiku Ndongo and James Njenga Ndungu, got a contract of 90 million shillings to supply 10,000 PPE kits. The grossly inflated prices handed over billions to a few well-connected individuals who then took advantage of the flawed procurement system at KEMSA. Corruption was now moving at the same pace as COVID-19.
The people who are associated with this company, some of them sit at the National Committee on Health. They are MPs, elected members of parliament. They are lawmakers. Some of them sit in the Senate. Some of them are PAs to very powerful figures in this country. I don't want to mention their name. So even if you were to investigate these particular people, where would you be drawing your authority and power? These are the lawmakers. They are trading with KEMSA. They can, form a canopy and protect themselves and sanitize themselves and make you and your office be as useless as possible. Then there would be an issue of witch hunt. Then there would be an issue of incompetence.
There are reports from investigators that some of the Senate members in your committee have been trading with KEMSA. Are you one of them?
Oh, no, Dennis, I'm not one of them.
Are you aware if there are senators who have been trading with KEMSA and getting some privileges when KEMSA is called to answer to some queries in the Senate?
I'm not aware as well. I'm not aware. And I am going to issue right now a directive for our second round of engagement with KEMSA. And I'm supposed to do it with the Committee of Health. Remember, we are supposed to have a joint sitting, but for us, our report has to come full circle. And I'll assure you that our report will come full circle by the time we finish this committee.
As the plunder continued, a petition was tabled before the National Assembly and committed to the Standing Committee on Health. The petitioner was the Health CS Mutai Kagwe, who wanted investigations to be done regarding the misuse of COVID-19 emergency funds through KEMSA. But there was another problem. At the Ministry of Health, the cartel was giving the Health CS a hard time in the cleanup exercise, and he was visibly frustrated.
But this building here has got its fair share of criminals. Like any other marketplace, there are a few mad cases in here. And we will unearth them. As we move on, we will unearth them. These are the people who you call a public officer, who you call a businessman, and tell them that they have got an order which they can help get him with a fake tender. But that fake tender might even have a Ministry of Health logo, because some criminal in here has given that fake logo. It will be those mafiosis who will tell you that you can do a deal with them to supply computers, to supply PPEs, to supply pens, to supply blood. Yes, blood.
These are people who have worked there, they've been in the medical service for long, they know how deals are cut across. You'd pass there at 3 a.m. and you find people still in the office and you wonder what they're doing. They are not CS, they are not the PS. Yeah? Exactly what are they doing? And these are common people we know.
This is the sort of place where people get transferred, and then you find they are still sitting here. Why would you be transferred and you still want to sit in that same desk? Wouldn't you be suspicious if you were me?
Are these the same people the Health CS Kagwe has been fighting at MOH Mafia House, as we call it? Are these the same people that
absolutely
are trading with MOH?
Thank you. Thank you so much. Because you realize, even before the announcement on 1st March, there was already a case, right? There was already a case at Ministry of Health where people who are not employees of Ministry of Health could actually access the boardroom at the MOH, and I'm talking about an executive boardroom. They would bring people who are people calling themselves suppliers. They would create documents which are neither here nor there. They would sit with them, conduct meetings, and obtain money from them.
Me, I've never seen a cartel. I have been warned I'll come into contact with them as we continue doing our investigations. Every time you start doing money investigations, you're warned that you're going to come into the face of these things. It's a bit scary, I must say. I have never been in that tough before. But these are faceless people. That's what they're saying. You will never quite hear a name.
As the plot made up of government officials, politicians and ruthless business people was enjoying the protection of influential individuals, the country urgently needed a significant supply of PPEs. The rate of infection was going up rapidly. As we settled down to speak to a doctor who tested positive but is now negative, the frustration for the frontline healthcare worker is written all over her face. How are you handling it?
It's a little bit scary, but you have to accept it. Because once you get it, I think you live with it. This thing is real.
Are you afraid when you walk into those wards to treat these patients?
I am afraid, yes, because now we don't know whether you are protected or not, you still get it.
For you as a frontline worker, how has been your experience?
It's been a tough experience. People are scared, including the health workers. 2 to 3 months down the line, you find that even health workers are getting infected. So it's like people don't know where we are heading to. We don't know who is safe.
For healthcare workers, their first line of defense is this government. As the global demand for personal protective equipment skyrocketed, local hospitals were running on deficits, and some people were now eyeing the PPEs meant for Kenyan doctors.
For PPEs, it is true that we also experienced an incident of persons wanting to steal PPEs, I assume, to go and sell them, to private hospitals and so on and so forth. So again, these are thieves.
When a CS says he's trying and you can see he's struggling to get it right, then where does that leave the rest of us? Those are really the challenging issues sometimes from where we sit, because this corruption is about Kenyans now to decide.
In the middle of a pandemic, at a time when we are discussing healthcare workers maybe working somewhere in Kericho, lacking PPEs, we are also talking of few individuals charged with the duty of managing a given institution, overseeing funds usage. Reports of corruption is it's unfortunate.
The incident involved an attempted grand theft of PPEs donated by the Chinese government through the Kenyan embassy in Beijing that was sent to Nairobi.
It just shows the nature and the characteristics of taking shortcuts and making margins where you're not supposed to be. We are not in this thing for profits. We are in it to make sure that we curb the pandemic, that if not checked, will consume the whole society. It will consume my kinsmen, it will consume people I know. Even me as a healthcare worker, I'm not 100% protected.
At the time, 81 healthcare workers had contracted the virus, with 60% of them linked to their workplaces, according to a report by KMPDU.
As we talk with you today, we already have up to 558 healthcare workers as of July who have contracted the disease. So some of them are in isolation. Unfortunately, 3 of them have already succumbed. That's a doctor and 2 nurses. So it's not something that we're just making noise about. It's something that is serious. And the seriousness of it will come with a situation where you have more healthcare workers in isolation centers as opposed to them being in the hospitals, because that will be disaster for Kenyans.
While the issue of quality is left to the concerned agencies to deal with, the end user, who is the healthcare worker, is dealing with another problem: size.
PP that is not up to standard is, number one, you can get like a bigger person has a smaller PP. And when it comes to removing that PP, it's a problem because you actually do not need to. That will make you contaminate yourself in the process of removing it because you need space.
This picture, sent to us by a concerned doctor who had just finished attending to a COVID-19 patient in the ICU, shows a big tear on the outer layer of his PPE. Occupational hazards and exposure for the medics are a real danger inside the wards, as our source demonstrates.
We have 2 PPEs. One is local, one is imported. Can you tell the difference between the 2 PPEs?
This, of course, will fully cover the person wearing it. This one you will need to retrieve, or that's the shoe cover for this.
Yes.
The texture, this is softer than this. This is a bit tough.
This will be more comfortable to wear for a doctor than this one. Trying to sit with this one,
it's uncomfortable.
It's uncomfortable. Yeah, look at the joints.
This is locally made.
This is locally made, and that's important.
Did it come like this?
It just peels off, sometimes. The issue is that it has to be heat sealed on all the joints.
This is like a sellotape.
Yeah, it's a tape. You can see you have a similar one here.
Yeah.
But how this one has been heat.
What do you mean by that?
Yeah. It's how to put it on top.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This has not been done so well. So this small flaws, and if you see this one, this has too many folds, and you can imagine now on top here, it means it cannot nicely fit on you. So on the folds, that's where you have spaces coming in. So you're not fully protected.
So is this what many of our medics are wearing today?
Yeah.
This locally produced PPE?
Exactly. This is what has been approved.
With all these faults?
Yeah, but I guess the standard is...
I mean, explain to me. I'm looking at the inside of this PPE. How
This one, this one is laminated. They just laminated it on top, just to prevent water from entering.
So what material is this?
This is...
This looks like the supermarket bag.
It will...
That material?
It will be almost the same. Because,
almost the same?
Yes.
And that's normal for all the PPEs?
Yeah, it's for...
So in other words, what our medics are using is not the right grade of PPEs?
Yeah, if they don't have the medical grade, whatever they're using, then it's not.
How much does this cost? This PPE plus the gloves and the goggles, and I'm assuming plus the mask. How much would this cost?
The suit alone will be buying $20, thereabout. Then we have these ones, you can get them at $1. This goggles around $10 or so. Gloves, I can say it's point something of $1. So the price is not that much. So, but right now, getting gloves again, it's becoming a challenge.
Yeah. Okay, so in a nutshell, the suit plus the gloves and the face mask imported is nearly $3,000.
4,000 there. 4,000 Kenya shillings, let's say.
$300.
Yeah. Look at the folds on this.
What's wrong with this?
Now, you see, what we are protecting is airborne. Okay? Yeah. So that's why they tell you, even when you're wearing your mask, it has to be tied in so that you're only breathing through the mask. So, but now when you have something that is allowing air to enter inside the folds, then what are you protecting? Nothing.
So this is wrong.
Yeah.
Okay, comparing that to this now.
See.
I see the difference.
This one comes in straight.
I see the difference.
So once you put it up, then it comes in straight.
So our medics are using this to cover their faces, but it has spaces in between where the virus can penetrate and get them.
Yeah, so it can be able to carry.
What about the other one?
So this other one doesn't give room for any air to go in because of
the seaming.
The
way
seams.
it is, yeah. So it comes in straight. So when you have lesser, because what you're sure the patient that you're seeing has COVID or doesn't have COVID, that particular person will actually breathe something, like when they're collecting. They're telling you to say, yeah, so that you can open up. So he breathes. So this person will carry it. So yes, he has removed this PPE, but it's landed somewhere on the surface. And they are, like they say, it can stay on your surface for a day. So you will take it elsewhere.
We have a medic who sent us a photo of wearing this PPE.
Yeah.
And around this armpit area, it was torn.
Yeah, that is, those are two things. One, quality. That is a horrible quality. If it is tearing, that's a horrible quality. Number two, it's the wrong size, because now this one's, the PPEs, they'll have sizes. You wear a large one and you're a small person. You know, you're like floating somewhere. Yeah, so you'll have even more spaces on you, because now the PPE is not to your size. But PPEs have sizes. They have small, medium, and large.
The country is currently flooded with locally manufactured PPEs, an excellent sign of increased production through local industries and a boost to the economy. Still, it's hard to tell from past experiences if the agencies responsible for testing and approving the garments are doing so without compromising safety. Healthcare workers are concerned about the availability and quality of personal protective equipment.
I did take myself to cabs
I took some Chinese PPEs and they failed the tests personally. So forthwith, we have not imported Chinese products because the Kenyan products are good enough or not even better.
The government actually is not with us in the wards. We are there in the wards. But the fact that they've provided us with the equipment, I think they think they've done enough. But usually there is more to that than just providing the PPEs.
There are some that failed the test when we went round to check the quality. Some of them did not meet the standards that are required. So when we're saying that we need adequate and of good quality, we mean what we say.
You know, putting a doctor wearing one PPE throughout the day is not a fair exercise. These things they should wear at least after 2 hours they remove. Yeah, move out for airing or anything else, and now just to reduce the exposure on.
The cost of testing for COVID-19 in many private hospitals is nearly 3 times the price of procuring the testing kits from suppliers. COVID-19 has exposed weaknesses in Kenya's healthcare system and patients are being exploited.
Ordinarily, if I go to a medical facility, I'll be charged 10,000 just to do this test.
13,000.
Or 13,000
yeah.
to do this test.
Exactly.
How much is all this, generally speaking?
This will cost between 300 and 400 shillings for the collection.
For the collection is
Yes.
300 shillings?
Yes.
So those extra charges are for what exactly?
Now,
Administrative. 10,000 administrative.
Many private institutions charge between 10,000 and 18,000 for COVID-19 test. That's expensive. But at Kenyatta National Hospital, a COVID-19 test costs about 5,000 shillings for those who need a certificate to show their employer. For COVID-19 inpatients, the bills are paid by the government. The admission is a mandatory 10 days at KNH. The cost per patient is 24,000 shillings per day, which includes charges for 2 PPEs. 1 PPE is charged at 10,000 shillings. The government's bill for 1 patient, according to an insider, is 240,000 shillings after 10 days. It's difficult to tell if the cost is inflated and by how much. In the wake of rising cases of COVID-19, the glimmer of hope for the country is in the number of recoveries, but healthcare workers have a different reality concerning the numbers reported by the Ministry of Health.
We are getting now large numbers and we don't have enough space for all these people. You get, especially the asymptomatic ones. What I don't understand is the recovery is whether they say the ones we discharge prematurely or the recoveries from home. I don't understand. I've never followed up that. Yeah, because once you are released from hospital, of course, somebody will say umepona. But is it true umepona ama? Because according to the health workers, we know, okay, the frontliners, we know these fellows are not yet recovered. They have just been released to go and self-isolate at home.
So they're being released while still positive to go self-isolate at home. So they're not fully recovered?
No, because they are asymptomatic. There's another time a patient was discharged and that patient was seen in the supermarket shopping.
So what do I need to do?
Just open your mouth wider, come out.
As I get tested, I can't help but think of the mismatch between care for the medics and care for patients. This is where the battle is, but the country is being dragged to fight a different and scary problem: corruption.
You remember when we went to Somalia? The kind of guns, artillery, and the things that were given to the soldiers. I mean, in this pandemic, the soldiers we have are the frontline healthcare workers. To an extent that a frontline healthcare worker can lack a PPE, it's not something to smile about.
Deliberations on the special sitting by the Committee on Health in Parliament on June 26, 2020 have never been made public. A legislator who spoke to NTV Investigates on condition of anonymity said submissions before the committee found KEMSA officers failed to conduct due diligence on the suppliers and the products and equipment supplied, and one member said KEMSA was a rot with cartels endangering the lives of Kenyans. The source further said the scope of services provided did not meet the specifications and quality recommended. Pricing of equipment was guided by bad morals and greed. One of the prayers to the committee was to urgently investigate the conduct of KEMSA and the Ministry of Health and suppliers.
Maybe you are not privy to some information. I don't know how this would be taken, but I would speak my mind. When the issue of KEMSA came, the first thing what happened is that officers, I will not say from which particular, department, but officers went and confiscated some of the documents. They confiscated some of the computers at KEMSA so that they could paralyze the investigations. So DCI or EACC coming to investigate would not actually get any documentation, would not get the information they're looking for. So I would come out, or members of the public would come out and blame this institution, saying the EACC is not doing enough. They are doing enough, except the information was taken. How was this managed? This was managed by top government officers who are calling and giving directives and instructions on what should be done.
We can't go like this. To an extent that we are talking about corruption even in the middle of a pandemic. We can't go like this in the country.
The corruption problem has now moved from the national level to the counties.
Now the fight is in the counties. The billions have been distributed to the counties. We have to get those counties now to account for each cent.
The money that we release to the counties, the controller of budget must be satisfied that it meets all the regulatory procedural steps.
Already we have statements from senators. Individual senators have already raised statements to our committee. In fact, part of the reason why we said the best way to do it is through the Auditor General's office. We've done county visits like we did Isiolo. Isiolo we did early on because the senator of Isiolo, Senator Dulo, raised a statement because she had whistleblowers who said the governor is misappropriating COVID funds. In the statement, they said, it's not honest when they say they have bought X number of beds, that apparently the beds were being, sort of rented from a private hospital nearby and put into the general hospital, and then they would be returned back, and all those allegations.
Captured in statements at the Senate, 4 counties are already under investigation. As cases of new infections continue to rise in counties, millions have been appropriated to support the devolved government. Corruption has cut through the system to ravage every facet of life in this country. Looting funds allocated for medical supplies, inflating prices of desperately needed test kits and protective gear for health workers is a new low for a nation that runs on a budget of 3 trillion shillings. As the fight to contain the deadly virus that has infected thousands and killed scores of people continues, the livelihoods of millions of Kenyans are being disrupted by the actions of money-hungry COVID-19 millionaires. Dennis Okari, NTV Investigates.